Turn to House Bill 968, Delegate Fisher. Welcome back to the committee.
First time this term.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, esteemed members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mark Fisher on behalf of House Bill 968. The bill is titled Agricultural Land and Programs, People's Republic of China Prohibition on Purchase and Participation. The bill prohibits a non-resident alien who is a citizen of the PRC, a commercial enterprise or business incorporated in the People's Republic of China, or an individual employed by or associated with the government of the PRC from purchasing land in the state, raising livestock that is located in the state, participating in the state agricultural programs that are unrelated to regulatory requirements for food and state safety. Just want to say for the record, in this committee, this is not a bill aimed at the citizens of the PRC. They are the victims. This is a bill that's aimed at the leadership of the PRC and the members of the Communist Party. I think it's pretty obvious that there's a gathering storm, as Winston Churchill called it. Most of us in the legislature have friends that work for the Pentagon or other agencies, and a very dear friend of mine who's in the Pentagon has told me repeatedly, as we've also heard from the Joint Chiefs, that over the course of the next 3 years, it's probably the most dangerous period in world history, let alone American history, for a whole variety of reasons. I want to also say for the record, I am actually not against, interestingly enough, folks from other countries buying houses and buying land at all. Never have been. That's why I narrowed this bill down to just very narrow, very narrow bill. I do have a colleague that had a bill here earlier. I understand that. I respect him. I don't support that bill. My name wasn't on it for obvious reasons, because I don't oppose folks owning land and owning homes and investing in the United States. I think that's a good thing for all of us. This is limited to this one organization and the members of the organization for all the obvious reasons, not the least of which the concerns are with the food supply and many other things. So remember, the United States government and the citizens of Maryland who are farmers can still export food to the PRC. That's perfectly allowed. I'm not, that's not my purview. We don't want to see people starve. This is really about security given the gathering storm. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We have another individual, Will Zwart, who has signed up to testify in favor of your bill. Mr. Zwart, are you out there? Ah, and there you are. Okay, come on up. Come on up, sit down, and you will have 2 minutes.
All right. Is this my mic here, or do you want me to just shout at you? Okay, thank you. Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Whenever you are.
All right, well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Back in 1830, the U.S. Congress, under pressure from gold miners and interest groups, passed the Indian Removal Act, forcing an estimated 100,000 indigenous tribes to abandon lands that they owned by right and treaty and relocate west. Some 15,000 died on the way in what became known as the Trail of Tears. The reason that the federal government was able to force so many people off their own property was because they were allowed to buy it. And something tells me they didn't give a fair price either. No government, foreign or domestic, should be allowed to take land from its people, much less sell it to someone else. Today, Chinese-owned farmland is greater than a city 7 times the size of Baltimore in the U.S. This is alarming, considering that they tried to buy more near a military base in North Dakota. What's to stop them from getting a small chunk of Maryland and putting a laboratory on it? We could become ground zero for another COVID outbreak. At the same time of the Trail of Tears, Southern slaves were not even allowed to own land. And it was only after they had property of their own post-Civil War that they began to flourish. Owning property is a fundamental human right, but owning it in someone else's country is not. Imagine if Russia wanted to purchase land in Ukraine. And who is Russia partnering with right now? China, the same nation that utilizes child slave labor to support its economy. The Emancipation Proclamation kicked slave owners out of this country. We should not bring them back. The more land China or any other country in America owns is less land for you to govern. If you support Maryland remaining in the hands of the Maryland legislature and not foreign interest groups and Soviet-like regimes, then you support this bill. I therefore urge you to vote in favor of it and bring it to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question goes to Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I first want to say that I do appreciate your concern. I must say, even though Germany is an ally, I was not thrilled when Bayer bought Monsanto and therefore owns essentially the world's best seed technology, and essentially all of our seed technology, or at least it was. But this bill really does concern me in many ways. I worry a lot about anti-Asian hate. We've seen a real uptick. And I worry that bills like this run the risk of demonizing people really unfairly. The other thing I wanted to point out is that during President Trump's term, he got into a big fight with China, at least a public fight with China. And China buys 1 out of every 3 soybeans we produce here in the United States. And China decided, because they were fighting with us, not to buy them. The price dropped to $8 a bushel, which is considerably less than it costs to produce a bushel of soybeans. And farmers really suffered as a result. So I understand our relationship with China is difficult, but they're also a critical trade partner. So do you share my concerns, or?
Yeah, so to be fair, I think I addressed that. And I think you should know for the record that while I am Roman Catholic, I am married to a Jew whose mother hid in a cemetery in Switzerland during all of World War II, so I'm very sensitive to these things. Wow. And I think it's also important to note that the bill is specific to the PRC. It's not specific to, of course, individuals who are in the United States legally and who are Chinese citizens. I think this is important. I hear what you're saying, but that's why the bill is so narrowly tailored for that reason. I can't underscore this enough, folks. There is a gathering storm. We can put our heads in the sand. We can be political and say, gee, what if this happened or that happened with respect to folks misinterpreting something, even though the bill is very clearly written and very, very, very narrowly tailored. But the fact of the matter is that this is a these are serious times. These are serious times. You know there's serious times when you have a friend in the Pentagon who's spending a lot of time in Guam and Taiwan pointing missiles. So for all those reasons, I'd be happy to talk with you offline as well. But believe me, I take these things very seriously too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thanks for the bill. Like Delegate Ziegler said, I share your concerns, and being a U.S. military veteran myself, I am no Chinese apologist. My concern is that perhaps the bill is not narrowly tailored enough in some of its language. When it speaks of a person associated with the government of the People's Republic of China, that seems very broad to me. Could you better define what associated means, or because again, as I understand it, most of the business entities in China are at least owned or heavily influenced by the government. In this case, would this apply to, say, a businessman who has a bank account in Beijing, for example?
So I think the bill says a non-resident alien who is a citizen of the PRC, a commercial enterprise or business incorporated in the PRC, or an individual employed by or associated with the government, which is what your point is, of the PRC. I mean, that language is in there, and I mean it. I mean, I actually, I'm one of those persons that asked the bill drafter to put that in there in that way, because the idea is to not have an out. I understand foreign investment is really important in the United States, and it's really important for the United States citizens to be able to invest overseas. And I can't thank you enough for serving in the country, believe me, when I say that, because now more than ever, we need people like you It's that serious of a time. And
I
I'm just
appreciate
hoping
that.
that the committee, if it's the committee's will to further, and your will, sir, to further tailor this so that's more direct and more limited, then so be it.
I just mean, because again, the idea of an individual employed by or associated with the government, would that apply to a U.S. citizen who had a Chinese bank account?
I think the simple answer is yes. I mean, I did.
So President Trump could not buy any land in Maryland?
I suppose not. I mean, I suppose not.
I figured that was worth asking. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And to be fair, maybe that should be tailored. The language would be, I mean, it's somewhat of a gotcha question, obviously. And we can play the gotcha questions, or we can all be serious about the legislation and try to do something that is meaningful. But good for you.
I'm sure there are plenty of Democrats who fall into that category as well. I don't consider it a gotcha question, personally. Next question goes to Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have a gotcha question.
Thank you, Delegate Stewart. You know, we're good friends, for
We
those
are.
who don't know.
We are. Are you familiar with the California Supreme Court case Fuji versus California?
I'm not.
Okay. So it overturned California's law called the Alien Land Act, which basically was this exact bill, but for Japanese citizens in the aftermath of Pearl
World War
Harbor.
II. Yep.
So my only question is, have you gotten an AG's opinion for this bill?
I have not. Be happy to do so.
Okay.
I'm sure it'll be pretty easy. And for the record, this is important. During FDR's administration, obviously there was a rounding up of Japanese citizens. These were individuals who were citizens of the United States, and obviously that was incredibly wrong.
Right.
And that is not what this bill does. This bill is simply saying that we want individuals who are connected to the PRC and obviously connected to the government itself, more importantly, to divest and or to be not allowed to purchase farmland.
Yeah, I don't mean to compare it to an internment, but that bill, though, did bar Japanese citizens from owning land in California, and it was struck down based on the 14th Amendment. So
How many years after the war was that?
the case came out in 52.
Yeah, so that's, as you would expect, because as you know, sometimes court systems work solely intentionally, to give the elected officials time to try to get through difficult times, such as wars.
Yeah, fair.
So it's not just laziness.
That's actually what happened. Yeah, it's like what happened in Korematsu, which ruled the internment was unconstitutional. It happened several years later. But yeah, if you do get an AG opinion, I'd be curious to see it.
I actually really appreciate it. It's a really great question. And
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, you know, we also have a pretty big problem with Russia at the moment. Would you be amenable to expanding this bill to include the same group of people connected to Russia?
I don't see why not. Why? I mean, obviously, there's an alliance between Russia and China. The alliance is pretty clear and it's pretty obvious. We all know that Russia has invaded the Ukraine. It's not the first time, by the way. For all of you who love history, and I'm one of them, there was a thing called the Holodomor, where millions of people starved in the breadbasket of Europe, which was the Ukraine, because the Russian communists came in and occupied the country, collectivized the land, and stole the food, and destroyed the farms. The stories were the people actually were walking on the street, just collapsing and dying at that second. That's how awful it was. Very, very underreported story. So the answer to your question is absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And you kept making reference to a gathering storm. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. That's after Winston Churchill's book, The Gathering Storm, the storm that was gathering right before World War II.
Well, I meant in the context, you and
That's
the,
exactly
and the
what-
witness.
This is
and
exactly what I mean. There's a gathering storm right now in the world
a gathering storm
between China and the United States.
toward war?
I
Is
think
that what you
that's-
mean?
I think that's very clear. I think it's already happening, quite frankly. There's
Okay.
a cyber war going on. There's an economic war going on. There is a transfer of technology war going on. There is a war going on, believe me. It's quite real.
Okay, thank you.
There appear to be no further questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you letting me be here and talk about this very sensitive subject.
Oh, I'm required by law to do that. Thank
Great answer.
you. No, it's perfect. It's my pleasure, of course. Take care, and we will now turn our attention to House Bill 1089.